Hey everyone, welcome to Reddit Readout. Today we are checking out People of Reddit. Story 1. Revenge on my sneezing dog. My dog is a sweetheart, but he's also gross. One of his gross habits is that whenever he needs to sneeze, he makes sure to walk up really close to someone in my family and sneeze directly on us. I have no idea why he does this. A few years ago I was loving on him, and he stopped cuddling with me, stood up, looked me in the eyes and sneezed a super wet sneeze right in my face. I decided to get revenge. I took him outside in the yard on a sunny day. I made sure to keep him close to me when I looked up into the sun. I felt a sneeze coming and said his name super excitedly to get him to look. I looked him in the eyes and gave a gross wet sneeze right in his face. The story doesn't do it justice, but the look on his face was priceless. His eyes got all big, kinda the same face he makes if our cat eats out of his food bowl. He looked horrified. Anyway, he still sneezes on me whenever he can. Still, it was nice to get revenge on my pet, petty revenge. Story 2. Misery loves company. So back in 2013 I started dating this guy we'll call Martin 30M, same-sex couple, and I was 32M. He owned his own house and I had just finished a long-term house sit, so he suggested I spend weekends at his, and during the week I had temporarily moved back in with my folks. This arrangement worked for a while and he had 3 roommates, Caitlin, McKenna, and Esmeralda. So for a couple of months it had been working okay and I felt we all got along and would help with paying for groceries, water bill, etc. Esmeralda was a school teacher in her mid-30s, a real miserable woman who had nothing nice to say about anyone, estranged from her family and would always be putting down other people and bagging out Caitlin and McKenna behind their backs, but very close to Martin. I couldn't stand her and warned him that she was most likely saying the same things behind his back. His relationships never lasted more than a couple of months because she kept interfering and never approved of anyone he was with. Guess I should have seen the red flag then, and I was no exception. So a couple of months in she went overseas to see her fiancé, who turned out to be a married man, and of course she wanted sympathy. The day she came back he wanted to throw her a big congratulations. She waited to get home to tell everyone what had happened. Meanwhile I had let their cat in, who also hated her, funny that, and he immediately went and peed on her bed. You know what, I actually didn't feel an ounce of sympathy for her, and seeing her expression of all those congrats balloons and finding the cat had urinated on her bed was priceless. Shortly afterward our relationship broke up. As part of the reason was she didn't approve. She also happened to work for a very religious school who held their teachers to the same standard. I may have sent an anonymous email saying, "Are you aware Esmeralda was running around with a married man?" I went on to meet my now partner and last I heard they both still live together and are miserable. Story 3. A kid picked on me, so I went to my older brother, but then that kid got his older brother, so my brother got our older brother. It goes on. Kid at school pushed me over in 7th grade. I'm a girl and I told my brother, who is 2 years older than me, so he went up to the kid and threatened him and made him cry. The kid then went and told his older brother, so he came up to my brother and pushed him around. My brother then went to our eldest brother, LOL, but instead of going to the brother that pushed my brother around, he went to the house and told the boys to bring their dad outside. The guys said they don't have a dad, so my eldest brother said, "Got a mum?" They said yeah. My brother said, "If you little cunts come near my brother or sister again, I'll come back and flog your mother." And those boys never even looked at us again. Story 4. Petty revenge minor backfire. I was recently reminded of a time when my 30F partner, 32M, and I were driving on a road trip. We got into a minor argument over something stupid. So stupid and minor, I can't even remember what it was. But he and I both stopped talking and drove in silence for a bit. At some point I realized it's so stupid that we're not talking on this drive over something so minor, and I think it was a little bit more his fault than mine. Now usually I will say it's often me that has the small problem and needs to break the ice and apologize so we can move on, but this time it was actually him. So me, not being the bigger person, decided that I am going to force him to break the silence, by silently putting on the hamster dance on repeat until he has to say something lol. This continued to play for several repeats, can you hear it? D-daily.d-da-do-do, until I finally caved and said, how are you not annoyed by this? At which point he said, yeah, it's a little annoying, but I thought you wanted to listen to it. OMG, this guy, haha. Story 5. Throw me under the bus, Nat, I don't think so. I work for a medical equipment company, specifically in the contracting department. We handle paperwork for million-dollar instruments globally, and I handle half of the United States in my territory. It can be challenging, and if a customer fails to sign an agreement, it can cost them hundreds of thousands of dollars a day if something breaks. And if they fail to sign because of me, then that can come back to bite my company in the ass, because we might have to pay for the repair ourselves. This hasn't ever happened yet, just a potential consequence. I'll knock on wood now, so I'm fastidious about my work. Half an hour ago I got an email from one of my account managers, we'll call him Hank. Subject line wasn't directly hostile, but it was marked important and listed a bigger account. Hank emailed me wanting to know why a contract hadn't gotten to the customer, basically asking, hey, this is way past due, and it's your fault, care to explain yourself? He CC'd his boss and my supervisors so they could all see my big mistake. I dug and looked, and he was right, the customer's contract expired 8 months ago. A little more digging and I found out he emailed me about this customer's equipment last September. So I reread the email chain, it was a conversation from half a year ago, after all. Luckily for me, I keep all my emails filed perfectly, account by account, and even color-coded in each folder based on info and subject. It's tedious, but it can definitely come in handy if I ever need to look back for any reason. Then I sent him a response. Hey Hank! These are the 2 equipment pieces you asked about back on September 10th, correct? The ones that were outside my scope? In the last email I'd seen from you about that, attached, you'd said you were putting together a contract for that equipment, because my team doesn't handle these types of contracts, which I confirmed for you in the attached email from 10-20 seconds. If I've let something slip through the cracks here, don't hesitate to ask. Always happy to help. I then attached the email where I'd told him I wouldn't be handling this because it wasn't my job, and also attached the email where he acknowledged I was correct and said he would handle this himself. I kept both of our supervisors CC'd. After all, he'd been the one who added them. I basically told him, yeah, you did ask about that, and we determined it was in no way my job and definitely something you should handle, and you said you'd handle that 6 months ago. Did you not handle it like you said you would, in front of our bosses? And now Hank's boss can start his day by reading about how Hank promised a customer a contract half a year ago and then never followed through. I suspect that Hank will be meeting with his boss in a few hours to discuss this. It's gonna be a tough day for Hank. Anyone tries to throw me under the bus, I'm ready with a judo flip. I ain't going out like that. Edit, sorry. I was typing on my phone. Contact was contract and was corrected. Story 6. The only time I've ever liked the PPA. I live in Philly and like all good Philly residents I hate the Philadelphia Parking Authority. My neighborhood has a lot of street parking but it can be hard to find sometimes, especially later in the evening. When I moved into my house I initially got pretty excited because there's always a car or 2 parked fully on the sidewalk along the side of my house, so I thought, oh sweet. I can just park on my sidewalk. This is almost as good as having a driveway. Not so. I parked there one time and got a ticket within 7 minutes. And yet somehow these same few cars park there all the time for hours and never get ticketed. That's deeply irritating to me, given as I am the one renting that sidewalk, but whatever. I'm a chill person. Ever since then I've just found other places to park and kept my grudges to myself. This week, however, I had put my trash and recycling out on the sidewalk for collection, as one does, and I was getting ready for work in the morning when I hear a grinding noise from outside. I looked out and saw one of the habitual sidewalk parkers blithely driving down the street and pushing my recycling bin in front of their car, because they had sideswiped the recycling bin while pulling out and decided to just take it with them. The bin ended up halfway down the block and the recycling went everywhere, cans, broken glass, everything. Because I'm not a dickhead and there are young children who live on my street, I went outside and did some damage control and picked up what I could, which made me late for work. I spent my whole commute to work imagining elaborate revenge fantasies like deflating their tires or egging their windshield, but then I realized, I don't need to commit vandalism to get back at them. They're parking illegally. As it turns out, the PPA has a snitch line. So the next time I saw that car parked on my sidewalk, I dialed up my good friends at the PPA and gleefully informed them of a parking violation. Sure enough, a few minutes later there was a ticket on the windshield of the car. Enjoy your $51 fine, dickhead. Story 7. Colleague makes me wait, I get even. I work for an airline that flies all over Asia. On one Shanghai layover trip, I was paired with a first officer, call him FO, known to have a chip on his shoulder. He'd actually joined the airline ahead of me but for whatever reason was still languishing in the co-pilot's seat while most of his contemporaries had already progressed to captain. It wasn't that he was a bad pilot. His stick and rudder skills were actually quite good, but his attitude left much to be desired. He was known to grumble openly about still being in the co-pilot's seat, blaming his failed upgrade on management pilots or instructors whom he thought had it in for him. I could sense he felt his seniority in the airline overrode the captain's authority in the flight deck. He was pushy and liked to make decisions without consultation even if they weren't his to make. Other captains agreed with this assessment. We were on a 2-night layover. The flight itself went well and we checked into the hotel just past midnight. As we headed to our rooms, he asked if I had any plans. I said I wanted to visit a far corner of the city to see the sights, culminating in late lunch at a century-old restaurant known for its soup dumplings. He asked if he could go, and I said I would be happy to have him along. We agreed to meet for breakfast at 9 a.m. and leave the hotel by 10:30. 9 a.m. sharp, I was at the hotel cafe. FO was nowhere to be found. As a courtesy, I waited 10 minutes before deciding to eat ahead. I was nearly done by the time FO waltzed in at around 9:35. He acted as if nothing happened, and I thought nothing of it. Perhaps he was just tired from our late-night flight and needed to catch a few more winks? After chatting briefly over breakfast, I decided to go back to my room to get ready. We agreed to meet at the lobby at 10:30. At 10:30 sharp, I was at the lobby but FO was nowhere to be found. He wouldn't show up for another 20 minutes. No apologies, no explanations. He just sauntered into the lobby, acting as if nothing happened. I again brushed it off and went on our way. The following day, I wanted to do some shopping. Again, FO asked to tag along and again, he was late for breakfast and the lobby meetup. At that point, the thought occurred to me, like some dickwad who thinks showing up last makes him the most important person in the room, FO was engaged in a deliberate power play meant to drive home the fact that I was his junior. I'm a staunch believer of the maxim don't get mad, get even. FO needed to be put in his place, but how? Telling him off would be too easy and too crass. I wanted to be more subtle but didn't know how. Yet. By mid-afternoon we were back at the hotel, resting for our flight home. The crew shuttle was scheduled to pick us up at 10:30 p.m. At around 8 p.m., the phone rang. It was the front desk manager relaying a message from our ground handler. Due to a weather-related delay, our departure time would be moved back 2 hours. This meant our hotel pickup would also be moved back 2 hours. I thanked the manager and was about to put the phone down when he asked, "Would you like me to inform your colleague as well?" At that very moment, a naughty little thought kernel that had been germinating in the nether regions of my consciousness exploded into full bloom. I now had my payback, and it was going to be interest-bearing. "Oh, don't bother," I said, "I'll call him myself." And with that, I put the phone down, reset my alarm and went back to sleep. At 12:30 am sharp, I walked into the hotel lobby. FO was there. Had been for the past 2 hours. Oh, didn't anyone tell you our flight was going to be delayed? I asked with feigned surprise. He shook his head glumly. So sorry to hear that, I said, somewhat too sympathetically. Anyway, shall we go? Shuttle's here. I turned towards the door and quickly walked away. It was all I could do to hide that diabolical grin. That's all for today. Please don't forget to like and subscribe.